Douglas Wilson's dream of finding love in paradise became a living nightmare when his younger Filipina bride orchestrated a scheme that left the 65-year-old expat penniless and abandoned. The devastating truth behind his marriage reveals how easily an American retiree can lose everything in a foreign land where nothing works the way it seems. It all started when Douglas found the eviction notice taped to his apartment door. 30 years at the same Chicago address, never a day late with rent, and now, at 65, he had 30 days to find a new home. The building had been sold to developers who planned luxury condos where working-class people once lived. His hands trembled as he tore the paper from the door, pain shooting through his arthritic fingers. The same fingers that had built his plumbing business from nothing, the business he'd been forced to sell last year after his heart attack. Too old to work, too broke to retire, Douglas muttered, crumpling the notice as he entered his empty apartment. The silence mocked him. No wife to share his troubles with since Margaret left 8 years ago. No nearby friends since most had died or moved to warmer states. Just four walls containing memories and regrets. The medical bills had devoured most of his savings. 3 days in intensive care, followed by medications he could barely pronounce, let alone afford. The business sale should have funded a comfortable retirement, but the market crashed a week before closing. He'd taken what he could get, barely enough to clear his debts and set aside a small emergency fund. Douglas limped to his refrigerator, the knee injury from his construction days flaring up in the Chicago winter. Inside sat a single beer and leftover pasta from the cheap Italian place down the street. He grabbed the beer, then noticed the blinking light on his ancient answering machine. His daughter Emily, calling from Australia, where she'd moved after college. Her voice sounded tinny through the speaker. "Hi, Dad, just checking in. We sent the kids' school photos last week. Did you get them? Call when you can." He hadn't called in months. What would he say? That her father was being evicted? That he couldn't afford plane tickets to see the grandchildren who barely knew him? That sometimes he sat alone in the dark, wondering where his life had gone wrong? The Chicago Tribune lay on his coffee table, folded open to an article he'd circled. American retirees find paradise in Southeast Asia. The piece described places where U.S. dollars stretched 3 times further, where medical care cost a fraction of American prices, where lonely foreigners could start fresh in tropical surroundings. A photograph showed palm trees and smiling expats holding drinks on a beach. His neighbor Harold had gone to the Philippines 6 months earlier after his own retirement. The postcard on Douglas's fridge showed Harold beaming beside a blue ocean. "Best decision I ever made," Harold had written. "Friendly people, beautiful country, and my Social Security check lets me live like a king. You should join me, Doug." Douglas had dismissed the idea initially. Leave America? At his age? But as the eviction notice deadline crept closer, as winter deepened and his joints ached more fiercely, as the silence of his apartment grew more suffocating, the thought took root. What was keeping him in Chicago? A basement storage unit containing boxes of memories no one cared about? A daughter who lived her busy life half a world away? A handful of acquaintances who might not notice if he disappeared? That night, as sleet hammered his windows, Douglas made a decision. He'd sell what little he had, use his emergency fund, and take a chance on rebuilding his life somewhere warm. Somewhere his money might last. Somewhere he might matter to someone again. 3 weeks later, Douglas stepped off the plane in Manila, sweat immediately soaking through his Chicago clothes. The heat hit like a physical force after the February chill he'd left behind. The airport bustled with families greeting returning relatives, drivers holding signs for tourists, security guards watching everyone with careful eyes. Douglas clutched his carry-on bag tighter. Everything important fit inside: documents, medication, the few family photos he couldn't bear to leave behind. 2 larger suitcases contained clothes and practical items. The rest of his life had been sold, donated, or abandoned in that storage unit he couldn't afford to keep. First time Philippines. The taxi driver grinned at Douglas through the rearview mirror as they lurched into chaotic traffic. "You like massage? I know a place. Pretty girls. Just a hotel, please." Douglas wiped sweat from his forehead, suddenly aware of how he must look an old white man traveling alone to Southeast Asia. The stereotype made him cringe. I'm here to retire, not that. The driver shrugged, unconvinced. Many American men come for retirement. Find wife too. Nothing wrong. Life too short to be alone. Douglas turned to the window, watching a world unlike anything he'd known scroll past. Children played in streets, next to luxury cars stuck in traffic. Gleaming skyscrapers rose above neighborhoods where laundry hung from windows. Digital billboards advertised skin-whitening creams and American fast food. Everything seemed contradictory, overwhelming. His temporary hotel in General Trias, a city outside Manila, was modest but clean. The young desk clerk smiled with genuine warmth as she processed his check-in, explaining breakfast hours, Wi-Fi passwords, nearby attractions. Her kindness nearly undid him. When was the last time someone had really looked at him while speaking, not just rushing through a transaction? First time in Philippines, sir, she asked, echoing the taxi driver. Yes. Planning to stay. Actually, looking for an apartment. Retiring here. Many Americans do this. Very smart. She offered local newspapers with rental listings. Our country will welcome you. But as Douglas lay awake that first night, ceiling fan whirring above his unfamiliar bed, doubt crept in. The hotel room's air conditioner hummed and clicked, fighting against the tropical heat that pressed against the windows. Street noise filtered in. Motorbikes, music, voices speaking a language he couldn't understand. What had he done? Sold everything, flown thousands of miles for what? A fantasy of palm trees and second chances? His savings, modest in America, might indeed last longer here. But would they stretch far enough? And when the money inevitably ran out, what then? No social connections, no family nearby, no understanding of local systems. He'd be truly helpless, truly alone. Douglas's chest tightened with the familiar sensation of panic. Had he escaped one kind of poverty only to face another, more dangerous version? In Chicago, at least he knew how things worked, had Medicare for emergencies, could communicate effortlessly. Here, he was functionally illiterate, conspicuously foreign, completely vulnerable. By his third day, Douglas had established a simple routine. Morning walks to the local bakery for breakfast, afternoons exploring potential neighborhoods for apartments, evenings reading expatriate forums on his laptop, searching for guidance. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by methodical problem-solving, his lifelong approach to challenges. At the Sunshine Cafe, he ordered the same thing every day, coffee and an omelet. The owner, a barrel-chested man named Rodrigo, practiced English with him. How long you stay Philippines? Rodrigo asked, wiping down the counter. Not sure yet. Months, maybe longer. Rodrigo nodded knowingly. Many Americans come. Many stay. He leaned closer, voice lowering. Be careful, my friend. Some see only your dollars, not you. Especially pretty young ladies with sad stories. Douglas stiffened. I'm not here for that. Nobody is, until they are. Rodrigo's laugh contained no mockery, only weary wisdom. Loneliness makes men stupid. Remember this. The warning followed Douglas as he continued apartment hunting. Each property manager showed special interest when they learned he was American. Prices mysteriously increased from advertised rates. Special foreigner fee. One explained without embarrassment. Others hinted at arrangement possibilities with female relatives looking for security. By Saturday, disappointment had settled like a weight on Douglas's shoulders. Every apartment felt wrong. Too expensive, too remote, too obviously aimed at exploiting foreigners. His hotel budget was draining faster than planned. The initial excitement of his bold move had evaporated, leaving only the realization that he'd exchanged familiar problems for unfamiliar ones. The public market offered a brief distraction from his worries. Stalls overflowed with tropical fruits he couldn't name, fish laid out on ice, vegetables stacked in perfect pyramids. He stopped to examine a display of wooden carvings, tiny carabaos and jeepneys polished to a shine. Those bring good luck, said a voice beside him. Douglas turned to find a woman smiling at him. She wore a simple blue dress, her black hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes crinkled when she smiled, laugh lines framing her mouth. Not young, maybe late 30s, but with an energy that made her seem bright against the market's chaos. "I could use some luck," Douglas replied, surprised at how easily the words came. Talking to strangers wasn't his strong point. All tourists say that. She picked up one of the carvings. "But you don't look like a tourist." "What do I look like?" "Like someone running away from something." She handed him the carving. "I'm Tessa." Douglas felt a strange flutter in his chest. "Douglas Wilson, and I'm not running away from anything. Everyone is running from something or towards something. Which one is it for you, Mr. Wilson?" Her directness caught him off guard. Americans danced around personal questions. Here, this woman he'd known for 30 seconds asked about his life's direction like she was asking about the weather. "Just Douglas. And maybe I'm just enjoying retirement." Tessa nodded, clearly not believing him. "Well, just Douglas. You picked a good place to retire. Or hide. Or whatever you're doing." She turned to leave, and Douglas felt a moment of panic. "Wait, do you work here? At the market?" Tessa laughed. "No, I teach at the elementary school and sell bags on weekends." She pointed to a small stall a few vendors down. "Handmade. My mother taught me." Something about Tessa made him want to keep the conversation going. "Can I buy you lunch? As thanks for your help." The question surprised even him. Had he just asked a woman to lunch? How long had it been since he'd done that? Tessa studied him for a moment, head tilted. Douglas felt suddenly self-conscious of his tourist clothes, his weathered face, his obvious foreignness. "My cousin can watch the stall," she finally said. "But I picked the place. Tourists always eat terrible food." As they walked through crowded market aisles, Douglas felt eyes following them. Local women whispering behind hands, older men nodding with knowing looks. The weight of unspoken judgments pressed against his back. Was this how it would always be? Forever marked as the old foreigner with a younger local woman, assumed to be buying companionship rather than simply sharing a meal? But when Tessa led him to a small restaurant down a side street he would never have found alone, when she ordered dishes that made his taste buds come alive after years of frozen dinners, when she laughed at his clumsy attempts to use chopsticks, something inside Douglas began to thaw, something that had been frozen since Margaret handed him divorce papers and walked out the door. "Danger," whispered Rodrigo's voice in his mind. "Loneliness makes men stupid." But watching Tessa talk animatedly about her students, Douglas wondered, was it stupidity to feel human connection after years of isolation? Or was the greater risk continuing to live half a life, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of making mistakes? As afternoon shadows lengthened, Tessa wrote her number on a napkin. "Call me if you want a proper tour guide, or just someone to talk to." Walking back to his hotel, Douglas felt a conflict brewing inside him, caution battling against the simple human need to matter to someone. He'd come to the Philippines seeking only financial salvation. But perhaps in this unlikely place, he might find something else he'd lost along the way. Not just security, but purpose. Not just affordable living, but actual living. That night, lying awake in his too-warm room, Douglas stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above. 3 options lay before him. Return to Chicago defeated, continue his solitary expat existence, or risk opening himself to whatever possibilities this unfamiliar world might offer, including the possibility of being hurt again. In his pocket, Tessa's number seemed to burn against the fabric. Rodrigo's warning echoed in his head. His daughter's unanswered calls haunted his conscience. His dwindling bank balance threatened his future. But for the first time in years, Douglas felt something beyond resignation or despair. Something dangerous, perhaps. Something that might lead to salvation or ruin. Something like hope. Douglas checked his watch for the 5th time. The fancy restaurant Tessa had suggested made him uncomfortable. White tablecloths, waiters in bow ties, prices that seemed outrageous even for Chicago. It had been 3 weeks since that first lunch, 3 weeks of daily texts and weekend adventures exploring nearby towns. Somehow, she convinced him to take her somewhere special tonight. "Sorry I'm late." Tessa rushed to the table, slightly out of breath. She wore a red dress that hugged her curves, her hair falling in waves around her shoulders. Douglas felt underdressed in his button-up shirt and khakis. "You look." He searched for a word that wouldn't sound creepy coming from a man 28 years her senior. "Nice. Just nice." Tessa laughed, sliding into her seat. "I spent an hour getting ready." The waiter appeared with menus. Tessa ordered wine without consulting Douglas. When it arrived, she raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "New beginnings," Douglas echoed, though he wasn't sure what beginning they were celebrating. Something had shifted between them. The easy friendship of those first weeks had developed an undercurrent he couldn't quite name. Tessa touched his arm when they talked. She asked personal questions. She sent good morning texts with smiling emojis. "My sisters think I'm crazy," Tessa said, cutting into her steak. "Crazy how?" "For spending time with you." She said it matter-of-factly, no judgment in her voice. "They say all Americans want the same thing." Douglas set down his fork. "What do they think I want?" "A young wife to take care of them." "A trophy." She shrugged. "They don't understand that some connections don't make sense on paper." The word wife hung in the air between them. Douglas coughed, reaching for his water. "Your sisters have quite an imagination." Tessa's eyes met his. "Do they?" "What do you want, Douglas?" The directness of her question left him speechless. What did he want? He'd come to the Philippines to stretch his retirement savings, to escape Chicago winters, to live simply. Finding Tessa, or being found by her, hadn't been part of the plan. "I want." He cleared his throat. "I'm not looking for a trophy or a caretaker. That's what you don't want. I asked what you do want." The restaurant seemed suddenly too warm, too crowded. "I want companionship, I suppose. Someone to talk to share experiences with." Tessa nodded slowly. "And is that all?" Douglas felt a flush creep up his neck. "I'm 65, Tessa. You're 37, she finished. Old enough to know my own mind." Later, walking back to his apartment, Tessa slipped her hand into his. Such a small gesture, but it sent his heart racing like a teenager's. At his door, she stood on tiptoes and kissed his cheek. "Think about what you want, Douglas. Life is short, even when you're young." That night, Douglas lay awake analyzing her words, her touch, the look in her eyes. Was she suggesting what he thought? And if she was, what then? He'd seen enough May-December relationships in the expat community to know how they appear to others. The assumptions people made. The judgments. Morning brought clarity in the form of a text message. Tessa invited him to Sunday lunch with her family. Meeting family seemed significant, a step beyond casual friendship. Her family's home sat on the outskirts of town, a modest concrete structure with a metal roof and a small yard where chickens pecked at the dirt. Children played in the street, stopping to stare at Douglas as he approached. He clutched the wine and chocolates he'd brought, suddenly aware they might be too formal. Tessa met him at the gate, dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt. The glamorous woman from the restaurant had transformed back into the practical teacher he'd first met. "Don't look so scared," she teased. "They don't bite." Inside, the house buzzed with activity. Tessa's mother stirred something that smelled wonderful. Her father watched a basketball game on TV. Sisters, brothers-in-law, nieces, nephews. Douglas lost track of names as she introduced each one. Her cousin Dante, a slim man with watchful eyes, studied Douglas while everyone else fussed over the American visitor. During lunch, Dante asked pointed questions about Douglas's life in Chicago, his business, his finances. "So you sold your company?" Dante looked skeptical. "And now you just travel?" "The money goes further here," Douglas explained, uncomfortable discussing his finances. "And how long will you stay?" This from Tessa's father, who until now had said little. "I'm on a tourist visa. I can renew it for up to 3 years. 3 years is a long time," Tessa's mother observed, spooning more food onto Douglas's plate. "Long enough to put down roots." The conversation shifted to local gossip, but Douglas felt the weight of unasked questions. They wanted to know his intentions toward Tessa. He wasn't sure he knew himself. After lunch, Tessa showed him around the property. Behind the house, a small plot held vegetables and fruit trees. Clothes hung on lines stretched between posts. It was a simple life, but the home felt warm in ways his Chicago apartment never had. "What did you think?" Tessa asked as they stood under a mango tree. They're very nice, Douglas said carefully. Your cousin Dante doesn't seem to like me much. Tessa sighed. Dante worries. His sister married an Australian who left her with 2 children and no support. He thinks all foreigners are the same. And what do you think? I think you're different. She stepped closer. I think you're kind and lonely and afraid to admit what you want. Before Douglas could respond, she kissed him, not on the cheek this time, but full on the lips. Soft at first, then with surprising intensity. When she pulled away, Douglas felt dizzy. Tessa, don't overthink it. She pressed a finger to his lips. Just feel. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Dinners, movies, walks along the beach. Tessa introduced Douglas to her friends, included him in her life as if they'd known each other forever. The age gap that seemed so important at first faded into the background. They fit together in ways Douglas couldn't explain. On a warm night, 6 weeks after they met, sitting on his balcony watching stars appear above the city lights, Tessa rested her head on his shoulder. My family says I'm crazy, she murmured, but I've never been happier. Douglas stroked her hair, marveling at how quickly she'd become essential to his days. They're worried about you. That's natural. They think you'll leave. Go back to America when you get bored. Is that what you think? Tessa sat up, her expression serious. I think you came here looking for something. I think maybe you found it. But I also think you're afraid to believe this could be real. She wasn't wrong. Part of him still waited for the other shoe to drop, for Tessa to reveal some hidden agenda. But weeks had passed without any red flags. She never asked for money, never hinted at financial problems. She had her teaching job, her weekend market stall, her own life. What if we made it official? The words left Douglas's mouth before he fully formed the thought. Tessa's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying, Douglas took a deep breath. Maybe your family would worry less if they knew I wasn't going anywhere. If we were married. The surprised joy on Tessa's face swept away his doubts. She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at once. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Everything moved quickly after that. Tessa knew exactly what paperwork they needed, which offices to visit, how to navigate the bureaucracy of a foreigner marrying a local. Douglas found himself carried along by her enthusiasm, signing documents he barely read, meeting with officials who explained rules he only half understood. We should have a place of our own, Tessa suggested as they left the municipal office one day. Not your rental. Something permanent. The real estate agent showed them several properties before Tessa fell in love with a small house near the beach. The price seemed reasonable by American standards, though steep for the local market. It needs work, Douglas observed, noting the outdated kitchen, the cracked tiles in the bathroom. We can fix it together, Tessa said, already planning where furniture would go, which walls they might paint. It will be our project. The word "our" made Douglas's chest tighten with emotion. How long had it been since he'd shared anything with someone? Since he'd been part of a we? Their wedding was simple, a civil ceremony followed by dinner at Tessa's family home. No friend from Chicago, no daughter from Australia. Just Tessa's large, noisy family and a few expats Douglas had met at the local American bar. During the reception, Dante cornered Douglas near the makeshift bar in the yard. Congratulations, he said, though his tone carried no warmth. You move very fast for an American. When you know, Douglas replied, the champagne making him bold. And what exactly do you know? Dante's eyes narrowed. Do you know Filipino inheritance laws? Property rights for foreigners? Visa requirements for married couples? Tessa handles all that. She knows the system. I'm sure she does. Dante sipped his beer. American men come here thinking they understand what they're buying. But nothing here works the way you think it does. Douglas bristled at the implication. I'm not buying anything. Tessa and I love each other. Dante's laugh held no humor. Love. Sure. He glanced across the yard where Tessa chatted with her sisters. Just remember, when things go wrong, and they always do, you're the outsider here. Not her. Before Douglas could respond, Tessa appeared at his side, radiant in her simple white dress. What are you two discussing so seriously? It's a wedding. Be happy. Dante melted away into the crowd. Tessa took Douglas's hand, leading him back to their guests. "What did he say to you?" she asked. "Nothing important." Douglas pushed Dante's warning from his mind. Today was about beginnings, not doubts. Later, as they prepared to leave, Tessa's mother pressed a small package into Douglas's hands. "For good luck in your new home," she said in halting English. Inside was a carved wooden cross and a small statue of the Virgin Mary. Douglas wasn't religious, but he thanked her sincerely. As they walked to the waiting car, Tessa slipped something into her purse. Douglas caught a glimpse of blue, his passport. "What are you doing with that?" "Keeping it safe," Tessa said, kissing him quickly. "We'll need it for your visa extension next month." It made sense. Tessa organized everything so efficiently. Why shouldn't she handle his documents too? As the car pulled away, Douglas watched Tessa's family waving goodbye. Dante stood apart, his expression unreadable. For a moment, doubt flickered through Douglas's mind. Then Tessa squeezed his hand, and the doubt vanished like morning mist in the Philippine sun. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning. Douglas woke to find Tessa already dressed, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapid Tagalog in the kitchen. When she noticed him standing in the doorway, she quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" Douglas asked, pouring himself coffee. "My sister. Family problems." Tessa kissed his cheek, a quick peck that felt like an afterthought. "I need to borrow money for the contractor. The bathroom tiles arrived, but they want payment before unloading." Douglas reached for his wallet without question. 3 months into renovating their beachside home, unexpected costs had become routine. The initial budget had doubled, then tripled. Each time, Tessa explained the increases as normal for Philippine construction. Each time, Douglas wrote another check. "How much?" 50,000 pesos. She didn't meet his eyes. About $1,000. More than tiles should cost, but Douglas had stopped questioning these things. As Tessa drove away in the used car they'd purchased, another expense he hadn't planned for, Douglas wandered through their half-finished home. The kitchen remained gutted, the master bathroom unusable. Workers appeared sporadically, did minimal work, then disappeared for days. Meanwhile, they lived in a rental costing twice what his first apartment had. Douglas opened the file cabinet where they kept renovation receipts. Many were handwritten on scraps of paper, some without company names or contact information. He'd been so caught up in his new life, in Tessa, that he'd ignored his business instincts. Back in Chicago, he would have fired a contractor who operated this way. His phone chimed with a bank alert. Another withdrawal from their joint account. This one for 75,000 pesos, not the 50,000 Tessa had mentioned. Douglas frowned. Third time this month the amount withdrawn didn't match what she'd requested. The front door opened, and Tessa's cousin Dante stepped inside without knocking. Since the wedding, he'd appointed himself project manager for the renovation, though Douglas had never seen him do actual work. "Where's Tessa?" Dante asked, helping himself to coffee. "Running errands." "What are you doing here?" "Checking progress." Dante wandered through the house, making disapproving sounds. "These workers are too slow. You should hire my friend's company instead. We've already paid the current contractor." Dante shrugged. "That money is gone. You won't see those workers again." "What are you talking about?" "They were here yesterday. They found a bigger job. More money." Dante sat at the kitchen table, studying Douglas with those watchful eyes. "My sister Louisa saw Tessa at the mall yesterday. Shopping. New clothes, new phone." Douglas tensed. "What are you implying?" "Nothing." Dante sipped his coffee. "Just making conversation." "Oh, I need to borrow 10,000 pesos. Family emergency." "No." The refusal hung between them. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "I understand. You're not family." "Not really." After Dante left, Douglas paced the empty house. Something felt wrong, like a pipe about to burst behind a wall. He opened his laptop and pulled up their bank statements. Large withdrawals had become more frequent. Payments to companies he didn't recognize. Transfers to accounts with names like T Family Fund. The sound of tires on gravel announced Tessa's return. Douglas closed the laptop, unsure whether to confront her. She burst through the door, arms laden with shopping bags. "Look what I found on sale." She pulled out dresses, shirts, a new purse. "And this for you." She handed him a shopping bag containing an expensive watch. "We can't afford this, Tessa." Douglas set the watch aside. "The renovation is already over budget. Don't worry so much." She waved away his concern. "The school gave me extra classes. More money coming soon." That night, Douglas lay awake beside his sleeping wife, doubt gnawing at him. Was he being paranoid? Or had he been blind? Tomorrow, he decided he would visit the school where Tessa taught, just to surprise her with lunch, just to see with his own eyes. The elementary school sat on a dusty lot surrounded by a concrete wall topped with barbed wire. Children in uniforms played in a courtyard, while teachers supervised from the shade. Douglas approached the security guard at the gate. "I'm looking for teacher Tessa Wilson." "My wife." The guard frowned. "No teacher here by that name." "Tessa Reyes, maybe? She uses her maiden name at work." The guard shook his head. "No Tessa. You sure this is the right school?" Douglas's stomach dropped. For over 4 months, Tessa had left home each morning dressed for teaching, returned each afternoon with stories about her students. Had it all been a lie? He tried a different approach. "My wife has taught 3rd grade here for many years. Black hair about this tall." He indicated with his hand. Recognition flickered across the guard's face. "Ah, you mean Miss Reyes? She no teacher. She worked in office part-time. Left last year." The world tilted beneath Douglas's feet. He stumbled back to his rental car, hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. The school hadn't fired Tessa. She'd never been a teacher at all. What else had she lied about? At home, Douglas searched for evidence of Tessa's life before him. Her teaching credentials, photos of her classroom, even her college diploma. He found nothing. The woman he'd married was a stranger. When Tessa returned that evening, Douglas waited in the kitchen, bank statements spread before him, her purse open on the counter where he'd found his passport hidden beneath makeup and tissues. "What is this?" Tessa stopped in the doorway, eyes darting from the papers to her open purse. "I went to the school today." Douglas kept his voice steady despite the anger and fear churning inside him. "They've never heard of teacher Tessa. You checked up on me?" Her expression hardened. "You don't trust me? Should I? Our accounts are being drained. The renovation never progresses. You lied about your job. What else have you lied about?" "I never lied." Tessa's voice rose. "I taught at a different school. You misunderstood." "Stop it." Douglas slammed his hand on the table. "No more lies." For a moment, Tessa seemed ready to continue the charade. Then something shifted in her eyes. The gentle woman he'd married disappeared, replaced by a calculating stranger. "Fine." She crossed her arms. "I'm not a teacher. Does it matter? I'm still your wife. Our marriage is based on lies. Our marriage is based on needs." Tessa's laugh held no warmth. "You needed someone to make you feel young again. I needed security. Fair trade." The bluntness of her assessment cut deeper than anger would have. "Is any of it real? Did you ever care about me at all?" Something flickered across Tessa's face. Regret, perhaps, or just annoyance at being caught. "Life is hard here, Douglas. You have no idea. Americans come with your dollars and your dreams, thinking you understand our world. You don't. So this was all about money." The pain in his chest felt physical, like a heart attack. "Not all." Tessa sighed, dropping into a chair. "At first, you were just another rich American. An opportunity. But you were kind. Different. Sometimes I almost forgot the plan." "What plan?" Tessa shook her head. "It doesn't matter now." Douglas gathered the bank statements with trembling hands. "I want a divorce." "No." The single word carried surprising force. "You would have nothing here without me. No one to navigate this world for you. No one to care if you live or die." The threat beneath her words chilled him. "I'll return to America." "With what money?" Tessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your accounts are empty. Your credit card's maxed out. Your passport expired." Douglas froze. "That's impossible. My passport is valid for 5 more years. Not according to the replacement I ordered." Tessa's calm frightened him more than anger would have. "The American embassy has a record of your passport being reported stolen and replaced. The new one expires next month. You can't do that. It's illegal. Many things are illegal. Many things happen anyway." She stood, gathering her purse. I'm staying with my sister tonight. Think about your situation, Douglas. Your real situation. We can still make this work if you're smart. As she walked out the door, Douglas realized with sickening clarity that the paradise he thought he'd found was merely a mirage constructed from his own desperate loneliness and her precise understanding of it. The immigration office buzzed with frustrated voices and the steady thump of official stamps hitting paper. Douglas sat on a hard plastic chair, ticket number 143 clutched in his sweating hand, watching the digital display above the counter. Now, serving 92. He'd been waiting 3 hours already. A week had passed since Tessa's revelations. A week of desperate calls to his bank in Chicago, where they explained that yes, the transfers were authorized. He'd added his wife to the account himself. A week of visiting lawyers who offered sympathy, but little hope once they learned his funds were gone. A week of sleeping with a chair wedged against his rental apartment door, jumping at every sound in the night. Mr. Wilson? A hand touched his shoulder. Douglas looked up to find a young Filipino man in a crisp uniform. Please come with me. Douglas followed him past the main counters to a small office at the back. A woman in a severe blue suit sat behind a desk bare except for a single folder. Her nameplate read Director Manalo, Immigration Enforcement. Sit down, Mr. Wilson. She didn't look up from the folder. We have a problem with your visa status. Douglas's heart raced. What problem? My tourist visa is valid for another month. According to our records, you applied for a resident visa through marriage to a Philippine citizen. She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. That application has been flagged for review due to inconsistencies. I never applied for a resident visa. These documents indicate otherwise. She pushed papers across the desk, application forms bearing what appeared to be his signature, though he'd never seen them before. Your wife submitted these 3 weeks ago. Furthermore, we've received information suggesting her marriage may be fraudulent, arranged solely for immigration purposes. Director Manalo's voice remained professionally detached. Such marriages are illegal under Philippine law. The irony might have made Douglas laugh if panic wasn't closing his throat. The marriage is real, though I'm seeking to end it now. Convenient timing. She made a note in the folder. Your visa extension is denied pending investigation. You have 7 days to leave the country. Outside the immigration office, the tropical sun blinded Douglas momentarily. 7 days to somehow find money for a plane ticket, pack up his life here, and return to Chicago where he had. What? No home, no job, few friends. As the taxi turned onto his street, Douglas noticed a moving truck outside his building. Drawing closer, he saw men carrying furniture out of the ground floor apartment, his apartment. Wait here, he told the driver, jumping out to confront the movers. What are you doing? That's my place. A burly man in a sweat-stained shirt blocked his path. Not anymore. Owners say you not pay rent. 3 months now. The landlady's face hardened when she saw Douglas approach. Your wife tell me you refuse to pay. She cried, very sad. She moved back with parents. The landlady crossed her arms. 3 months, no rent. You go now or I call police. Please, just let me get my things. My clothes, my passport. Everything goes to storage. You pay, you get. Her expression softened slightly. Your wife already take important things. Papers, electronics. She say you know about this. The taxi driver took pity on him, suggesting a cheap hostel where foreigners sometimes stayed. Douglas paid with his last cash, securing a bed in a dormitory room shared with backpackers half his age. That night, lying on a thin mattress listening to strangers' snores, Douglas hit bottom. How had his retirement dream turned into this nightmare? Morning brought no clarity, only the harsh reality of his situation. At the hostel's communal kitchen, Douglas nursed a cup of instant coffee, trying to form a plan. Rough night. A voice interrupted his thoughts. An older man with leathery skin and a gray ponytail sat across from him. Australian by his accent. Name's Pete. Saw you check in yesterday. Looked like you were having a bad day. Douglas gave a hollow laugh. Bad month, more like. Pete nodded sympathetically. Let me guess. Woman trouble. How did you know? Seen it before? Too many times. Pete sipped his own coffee. Local girl? Younger? Moved things very fast. Douglas felt a flush of shame. Am I that much of a cliché? Mate, there's a reason clichés exist. Pete sighed. Same scam, different faces. They find lonely foreigners, promise love and care, then bleed them dry. Some are one-woman operations. Others have whole families involved. I need to get out of here. Back to America. Got money for a ticket? No. Pete studied him. Embassy won't help unless you're destitute and homeless, which technically you now are. But their emergency repatriation loans take time to process. I only have 7 days before immigration detains me. Jesus. Pete whistled low. She really did a number on you. Got your passport? Douglas shook his head. She has everything. I know someone who might help. No promises. The someone turned out to be Dante, waiting at a coffee shop near the market where Douglas had first met Tessa. The sight of him sparked anger that briefly overcame Douglas's despair. You were part of this from the beginning. Dante raised his hands. Not exactly. May I explain? Tessa is my cousin, yes, but we're not close. Dante ordered coffee for all 3 men. My warning at your wedding was genuine. I've seen her do this before. Why didn't you tell me directly? Would you have believed me? Dante asked. Foreign men never believe warnings about their beautiful young wives. They think their story is different, special. The truth of this observation stung. So why help me now? Because this time, Tessa and her brothers crossed the line. Dante's expression darkened. They've done this before. Find foreigner, marry, take money, disappear. But they never involved the immigration office. Never falsified government documents. So this is self-interest. Douglas felt too tired for anger anymore. Does it matter why I help, if you get what you need? Dante slid a folder across the table. Your passport, your real one, not the fake replacement. And documents showing the property transfer to your name was never completed. Douglas opened the folder with shaking hands. How did you get these? Tessa's mother gave them to me. She doesn't approve of what her daughter does, but she's afraid of her sons. Dante sipped his coffee. Those brothers, they're dangerous men. They've threatened people who try to pursue Tessa legally in the past. And now they're looking for you. Dante's voice lowered. They know you visited immigration. They're worried you'll go to the authorities. That night, as Douglas checked into a different hostel under Pete's name, the full weight of his situation pressed down on him. Even with his passport recovered, he remained stranded in a foreign country where his wife's family wanted him silenced, his bank accounts emptied, and his immigration status in jeopardy. Sleep refused to come. Through the hostel's thin walls, he heard someone's phone ringing, footsteps stopping outside his door. Was he being paranoid, or had they found him already? As dawn broke, Douglas's phone, a cheap prepaid model Pete had purchased, buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. They know where you are. Get out now. Heart racing, Douglas grabbed his backpack and passport. Through the window, he spotted a black car across the street, 2 men watching the entrance. Tessa's brothers? Police? He couldn't risk finding out. The hostel's back exit led to an alley. Douglas slipped out, keeping close to the wall. Behind him, he heard a door slam, footsteps running. Without looking back, he broke into a sprint, turning randomly down side streets, try to lose whoever pursued him. After 10 minutes of desperate running, Douglas ducked into a crowded market, blending with early morning shoppers. His lungs burned, legs wobbling from exertion. At 65, he wasn't built for escape and evasion. When his phone buzzed again, Douglas nearly dropped it in panic. Another message, Internet Cafe on Resolve Street. 5 minutes. Look for the red umbrella. Could be a trap, but staying in public seemed safer than hiding. As Douglas approached the cafe, the vendor beneath a faded red umbrella nodded toward the door. Inside sat Dante. Quickly, he said when Douglas reached him. They're checking hostels and hotels. Not safe for you anywhere now. Who sent the messages? My contact at immigration is investigating Tessa and her brothers for multiple fraudulent marriages. Your case broke the pattern open. Hope flickered in Douglas's chest. So immigration will help me? Not directly, but my contact helps secure an emergency exit permit. You can leave the country today, if we can get you to the airport safely. Shoes squeaked against polished floor tiles as Douglas limped through O'Hare International Airport, clutching a worn backpack to his chest like a life preserver. 6 months had passed since his desperate flight from the Philippines. 6 months of nightmares that left him gasping in the dark. 6 months of jumping at unexpected knocks on his door. 6 months of rebuilding a life from nothing. His old friend Mike had offered his basement while Douglas got back on his feet. At 65, those feet moved slower now, burdened by more than arthritis. Pride made each step painful as he walked past younger men in business suits, women with purpose in their stride. Who was he now? An old fool who'd lost everything chasing a fantasy. Mr. Wilson? A young woman approached, clipboard in hand. I'm Cheryl from the State Department. Thank you for coming. Douglas followed Cheryl down a long hallway to a conference room where 3 people waited. This is Agent Ramirez from Diplomatic Security. Cheryl indicated a serious-looking man in a dark suit. Ms. Parker from Consular Affairs and Mr. Lopez, our Philippine liaison. Please sit down. Agent Ramirez gestured to an empty chair. Your case has helped us identify a significant fraud ring operating in Calabarzon province. Ms. Parker slid a folder across the table. Do you recognize these individuals? Inside were surveillance photos. Tessa outside a restaurant with an older white man, Anton watching from a nearby table. The final image made Douglas's stomach lurch. Tessa in a white dress beside a gray-haired man who wasn't him. Another husband? Douglas's voice caught. Her 4th, actually, Australian. They married 2 months after you left the Philippines. Have you caught her? Them? Not yet. But we're building a case. Agent Ramirez leaned forward. Your testimony is crucial. You're the first victim willing to speak on record. Victim. The word tasted bitter. That's what I am now. As Douglas provided his testimony, carefully recounting each step of Tessa's deception, something unexpected happened. The shame that had haunted him began to lift, replaced by clarity. He hadn't been uniquely foolish. He'd been methodically targeted by experienced criminals. His vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was humanity. Outside, Douglas met Edward Mason, who ran a support group for men with similar experiences. Over coffee, Douglas found himself admitting things he hadn't told anyone. Not Mike, not the investigators, not even himself. How beneath the anger and shame lay a deeper grief, mourning the love he thought he'd found. The hell of it is, Douglas confessed, sometimes I still miss her. The person I thought she was. Edward nodded. That person never existed, but your feelings for her were real. That's the cruelest part of the con. How did you start over? At our age. One day at a time. Edward stirred his coffee. Found work consulting on construction projects. Started teaching English on weekends. Built something new. 2 months later, Douglas stood in Manila's international terminal, heart hammering as he cleared immigration. This time, he carried proper documentation. A work visa sponsored by New Horizons English Academy, owned by Pete's brother-in-law. This time, he understood the country he was entering, its beauty and its dangers. Angeles City looked different in the dry season. Less green, more dust coating the roadside shops and food stalls. The language school occupied the 2nd floor of a concrete building, its yellow sign faded by sun and rain. You came back. Pete greeted him with a firm handshake, sun-weathered face breaking into a grin. Didn't think you would. Neither did I. Douglas set down his suitcase, just one this time, containing only necessities. Didn't have many options back home. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a living area just big enough for a couch and television. But standing on the tiny balcony, watching motorbikes zip through streets lined with flowering trees, Douglas felt something unexpected. Possibility. As weeks passed, Douglas established a routine. Morning classes teaching business communication, afternoon sessions with teenagers preparing for college entrance exams, evenings spent preparing lessons or talking with other teachers at a local restaurant. The work gave him purpose. The modest salary covered his needs. His nightmares grew less frequent. 3 months into his new life, Douglas received an email from Agent Ramirez. Tessa and Anton had been arrested attempting to marry Tessa to a German tourist, her 5th foreign husband. The evidence Douglas had provided formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. That evening, Douglas walked to a small park where elderly locals played chess and children chased each other around benches. A group of his students waved from a food stall, calling out English phrases they'd learned that week. His phone buzzed with a message from his daughter, Emily. Rare communication since his financial collapse. She'd seen news about the fraud ring arrests online, connected the dots to her father's sudden return from the Philippines. Her message was simple. "Are you okay, Dad?" Douglas stared at the screen, considering his answer. Was he okay? His retirement savings were gone. He worked longer hours at 66 than many men half his age. His life had shrunk to a small apartment in a foreign city where he would always be an outsider. Yet watching the sunset paint the sky above Angeles City, Douglas realized something profound. He had lost money, possessions, pride, but not everything. Not himself. Not his capacity to begin again, to help others, to find meaning beyond material wealth. "I'm better than okay," he typed back to Emily. "I am rebuilding. Maybe someday you and the kids can visit." When his phone rang minutes later, Emily calling for the first time in years, Douglas answered with steady hands, ready to tell his story not as a victim, but as a survivor. And as he spoke with his daughter, watching Philippine children play in a park halfway around the world from a Chicago home, Douglas understood that paradise wasn't a place you found or purchased. It was something you created through honest relationships with others and, most importantly, with yourself.